Welcome to another TIRIAS cast. I'm Jim McGregor. I'm here with my colleague Francis Sideco, and we're going to be talking about Qualcomm today. Qualcomm recently had its Investor Day, and they've changed the name of this over the years, but it's essentially their pitch to Wall Street in New York City this past week, and Francis attended. Thank you, Francis, for going since I've been down with the flu. I really, really appreciate you
Of
pulling
course.
the ball on this one. So thank
Yeah.
you. Now, now, unlike previous investor days, they kind of talked about the whole spectrum of things this year instead of just focusing on automotive or, one particular area. Now, and they throw out some really, really big numbers. So let's start with the biggest number, $900 billion by 2030.
Well, let's put that into context. So yes, they did talk about they did, that is a big number, by the way. Um, they did talk about a lot of different areas, but it was all under the framework of the diversification strategy that Cristiano put out back in this Investor Day in 2021. And how well that's doing and how well they're executing against it. So that $900 billion number isn't a revenue number for them. It was them saying, because of our efforts in diversifying into other areas outside of just the mobile smartphone, we've expanded our TAM to by 2029 to a $900 billion TAM. So that was the point about that number. Now, obviously, they're going to get some portion of that, and it gives them a lot more, headroom to do that in across the different areas that they covered. And they have other areas. They have a lot of areas that they're going through, but they highlighted primarily auto, XR, industrial IoT, and I'm missing one more.
PC.
PCs, one of the important ones. Yes, AI PC.
Now, they also said that the goal was 50% handset and 50% other by that period of time.
Yeah.
So obviously that's the other, a big chunk of that 900 billion TAM is the other.
That is a good point because there's no point in diversifying if you're going to let your core business suffer, right? So that was another point that Cristiano made when he was setting the stage in his keynote for this day was that yes, you're going to hear us really focus about all these other things because that's where the growth is, but don't forget we're still very strong in mobile and we're still going to continue to be strong in mobile and that's not going to get put in jeopardy. So everything we're talking about is growth. Mobile's going to grow and it's going to grow at whatever rate it's growing. But all of this other stuff is above and beyond that.
But they did say that they could lose some of that chipset revenue from Apple on the mobile side by 2027.
Sure, and there's always going to be puts and takes, and we've
Yes.
seen that over the years. But the core message, if you want to really look at what he was trying to say, hopefully it resonated with the Wall Street guys, is that
Mhm.
even with those puts and takes, mobile is solid. It's going to continue to grow organically, and then we're going to put this on top of it.
I have to be honest, that is probably still the most positive thing I've ever heard about Apple actually finally having its own modem.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, right, exactly. Because they've been trying, and we've put out an article on it. It's hard to do 5G modem, and
Well, we're looking at kind of advanced stages of 5G by
5G,
that
yeah,
time, and even
yeah,
looking at 6G by that time. So,
right,
yeah, it is a challenge for Apple to actually finally catch up, but
yeah,
it is interesting and true. And obviously, mobile is more than just smartphones. Mobile is tablets, mobile is hotspots, mobile is obviously and Qualcomm's leveraging their mobile expertise in a lot of areas. So obviously, one of the big areas is automotive, where they
well,
already dominate telemetrics. They already dominate that communication to the car.
right.
But and they've had unprecedented success in moving into the infotainment. In their first year out, they had over 21 design wins. And now they're vying not just for the infotainment, but also for that ADAS solution. So talk a little bit about what their plans are for automotive.
Yeah, and I had a chance to speak with the GM for Auto, Nakul Duggal, who's frankly had an amazing run at it, and now he's being tapped for all the other main diversification areas too, like industrial and potentially even cloud, which is kind of on the next horizon. But some of the big stats that they provided there is that as of today. They have a $45 billion design win pipeline that's going to be monetized over the next, where are we, 24, over the next 5 or 6 years. To the tune of, let me pull this up here, to the tune of by 2029 fiscal year, automotive's gonna, for that year, we'll have an $8 billion revenue is what they're expecting, right? So that $45 billion is ramping between now and even past 29. And if you add it all up, that's where you get the 45 billion. And obviously they're not going to stop there. And to your point, it's both a ramp on cockpit, which is their IVI solution, and then a second gear, pun intended, of their ride elite platform, which is for ADAS. Now, in between there is a platform that they haven't really talked about a lot. Is called Flex, which is basically a single SoC that can do both cockpit, basically infotainment and ADAS capabilities, and that's going to help really drive volume penetration of these solutions across all the tiers of vehicles at their OEM partners. So they're definitely very bullish about that market, and that's the area that's leading the way in terms of this diversification strategy.
Yeah, and that's for all the different segments of the automotive market. So not just for AVs and EVs, but also obviously that's the biggest growth area, but also for ICE or hybrids, and also for the kind of the value segment.
Yeah.
That I think that's one of the biggest challenge the market has now, especially for EVs, is to bring that cost down. I think they
Well,
overestimated what the public would accept, especially with the limitations with EVs.
and it goes even past that. Excuse me. The interesting thing is so Nakul has been put in charge of also their industrial IoT segment. Okay, and you might wonder, what does that have to do with automotive, other than automotive is part of IoT?
Yeah, you don't typically think of Qualcomm for industrial IoT, so
Right. And they're putting out some things there. They've got kind of a framework that they go
hmm
through to address these new markets. But the interesting thing about that is, uh, you know, part of the industrial segment, whether it's robotics or drones or or some other, industrial like farming equipment, vehicles, those are all vehicles to some degree. And they're actually able to leverage their automotive products into these areas. So if you actually even think about it, the IQ series that they just launched at Embedded World a couple of weeks ago is actually based on their automotive platform.
yes, that's a very good point. So IoT, so is that the best way for us to think of industrial IoT for Qualcomm, is kind of, adapting what they have for automotive and other segments?
Yeah, yes, and I mean obviously you're always gonna adapt, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to start from scratch on any of these. You're going to leverage all of this, but each of these areas have their own unique challenges that they're going to need to fix. With with automotive, it was a notoriously difficult market to crack. Lots of entrenched competitors that they needed to go after, and and also the regulatory compliance that's necessary in that area had certain challenges that they need to overcome, and obviously they're overcoming it. Similarly, with industrial, it's also a very difficult market to crack. the issue there is the fragmentation of that market. And the requirements are a huge range of everything from something that barely needs any kind of compute to something that might need 100 TOPS of MPU capability for robotics, for example. They're rolling out products that can span that, at least if they're successful in what they're trying to do. But the key thing that was kind of a common theme across all of the areas that they talked about expanding is that they needed some kind of differentiator that was going to disrupt the market. And in each of these areas, whether it's automotive, uh, PC, industrial, even XR, the common theme was the role of AI in those areas and how it's changing the use cases, and the dynamics in those markets. And that's the entry point that they're trying to get into, using
You know,
that as a leverage.
well, and I would agree with that. And I think one of the greatest challenges any company going forward is the fact that AI is going to impact all these markets, and AI is going to be different for all these markets.
Yeah.
So where you may have reuse on some of the software side, you may have reuse on some of the hardware side, you may not have the same reuse on AI. So that's going to be, I think, the thing for all of us to watch is,
Yeah.
how's Qualcomm, how do all these companies, how are they going to be able to focus on AI solutions for all these different markets? Because they are definitely not the same AI.
No.
So okay, let's get in the other two segments. First one is XR.
Yeah. So XR,
That's my favorite, by the way.
yeah. Well, so there's a couple things about XR that are interesting with how Qualcomm's approaching this. First of all, it was Investor Day, so let's talk about what Akash, their CFO, actually had some really strong, positions on what kind of revenues the street should expect from each of these different areas. So in terms of XR, he put out there, he drew the line that they're expecting that by fiscal 2029, $2 billion revenue run rate uh,
Wow.
by that point. We'll talk about AIPC later on, but just for reference, they expect a $4 billion revenue by FY 28. And I asked Akash later on a sidebar. I'm like, hey, did you talk to Ziad and and Kadar about those numbers before you said anything? And he's like, well, that's the number. So
Well, and as you know, and Qualcomm's always promoted that idea of XR, and XR is VR and AR,
yeah.
augmented reality and virtual reality, and being that next leap, especially for mobile, especially AR. And I completely agree with that. I think we finally, I think we will get to a point where we're not carrying around a rectangular brick. And I'll be honest with you, I think if we are in 10 years, I'm going to be disappointed.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing about that. And Durga, who is, I call him their chief AI officer, even though he's
Yeah,
not. He's their SVP of, I think, technology roadmap and portfolio and edge. Um, he has posited this thought of AI is the new UI. And I
yeah,
completely agree with that. And that really starts talking about agentic AI, where literally you have a honest to goodness assistant that you can talk to, like a Jarvis, from
yeah,
Iron Man. And XR really lends itself to that kind of a UI,
yeah,
because you're not going to have a keyboard, you're not going to have a mouse. You might have something like, like a virtual keyboard with your hands for virtual reality, but that's a very small sub segment of it. Most of it, especially when you start to extrapolate like a Meta XR, Meta AR glass, where there's I actually had a chat with Ziad at Snapdragon Summit. Ziad's their new head of the XR business, and and when you extrapolate kind of the vision for AR, which is you start having actual visual elements to the AR glasses that allow you to not just have video see-through, but actual see-through and augmenting real reality to the point where potentially even some of these lenses are able to correct vision in real time.
Hmm.
You're for those kinds of devices and use cases, you need an AI assistant to be your UI, to where you're not even doing
Yeah.
apps. You're just talking to your assistant, and then that's the thing that goes and activates whatever apps
Yeah.
or data it needs.
It's kind of ironic because it seems like with each jump in technology, we get farther and farther away from the actual technology that's enabling it.
Yeah.
So, we used to have deal directly with apps or go directly to websites to do stuff with the internet. Then we got the apps where you didn't need to go through browsers and you need to go through websites. And now, with AI, we're you know, kind of getting rid of not just the hardware and the software, but that whole experience where it doesn't really matter. The agent does everything for you. So it
Well,
obfuscates all the technology.
it's an abstraction layer, and I'll do you
Yes.
even one better on the front end of that. Remember command line interface, Jim? I mean, we used to
Hey, I'm not going back that far. I'm not that old.
but yeah, command line interface, and then
Yeah,
you had Windows, and then you had browsers, and then you had apps. Not to say that those functions aren't still in there somewhere in the
they are.
background, but they're being abstracted for sure.
Yeah. So, okay. So the last area obviously has been huge this year, and that's AI PC.
Yeah.
So, and we've heard different things. Obviously, we have evaluated and are still evaluating some of the AI PCs from the different companies out there, including the Snapdragon Elite PCs. So, what kind of vision did they give you for the AI PC market and Qualcomm's role in the PC market?
Yeah. So clearly, and especially with the portfolio that they've already launched, right? So
Hmm.
they have the X Elite at the top end. They have the X Plus kind of in the right below that, and then an X Plus 8 core right below that. I think it was Alex who teased potentially next year another element to that stack. He teased it at Investor Day, so I feel okay talking about it. And I'm sure we'll hear more next year. But uh, clearly, they are looking to not just be in one tier of the PC
Hmm.
market. They're going after all the tiers and helping their OEM partners to be able to develop on one platform and address all of the needs of their constituents. So that's that. They didn't give any direct numbers as to how the shipment numbers have been since their launch this summer, but they did provide a lot of strong design win traction, which I think was in the hundreds, if I'm not mistaken. It was two times an increase in design win traction across all of the tiers. And if you think about kind of the cycle here, the PCs that are going to get launched in 2026 are what's being finalized right now.
Yeah.
So the PCs we're going to see at CES in a couple of months in 2025, a lot of those designs were already finalized um, last year, which was before the X series even became available, right? So the fact that they have some designs already out in the market, that's a good sign.
More than 50, actually. But
Yeah,
yes.
more than 50. So that's actually a good sign considering they came in at the middle of the design cycle.
Yeah.
But they're very bullish about it because of the sheer amount of design wins that the OEM partners are giving to them. If they did, their argument is if the OEMs weren't liking the solution, they wouldn't be getting all of these design wins, right?
Yeah.
they give those
Well,
slots to
and
someone
they did at least give a forecast, and that was $4 billion by 2029
of revenue. Yeah,
of revenue. And if we, from our extrapolation,
yeah,
and depending on what the forecast ends up being, the latter part of this decade, which is
yeah,
very flexible,
yeah.
we're estimating that's 10 to 12% of the market. So
That's right.
that's still an aggressive forecast for an upstart in a market that's dominated by two other players.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's aggressive, but it's realistic. Now, if they told us they were going for 40% market share in the next 4 years, we'll be like, yeah, that's probably not ever going to happen. It's going to take a lot longer than that. And the other thing that was interesting was everybody from Cristiano to Akash to Alex and Kedar, who's really the kind of the leadership team that is looking after AIPC, they're very realistic about this. They're like, look, we're
Mhm.
expecting this to be a long ramp, and we've done our investments and our planning to reflect that. We're not expecting this to be, that Alex Katuzian gave an example. It takes them sometimes seven, like when they first went from CDMA to UMTS in and broke into that market. It took them 7 years to become profitable in the UMTS market. So they understand what it takes to ramp up in a new area that has established competitors. And we're now at about that 7 year mark. They started this AIPC journey about 7 years ago, 2017.
Well, and I know they didn't mention it, but I'm still thinking that pretty soon, within the next year, we have to hear about a discrete GPU strategy. So,
They
still
didn't
waiting
say
to hear it.
anything. This is more of a financial kind of
I know they
investment
didn't
grade,
say
right?
anything, but it's got to be there.
Yeah. Well, I think if they want to, yeah, if they want to address more of the specialty or enthusiast class PCs, I think you're gonna need to.
Yeah, well, and even some of the creators,
Yeah.
or some of the creators, gamers, STEM,
Yeah.
all of those kind of require that kind of performance. So
You know,
it's going to be interesting.
I'll put this out there. I think that kind of it kind of depends on how the developer ecosystem and how successful the AI hub is for
Hmm.
them. Because if they're able to get a significant amount of the ISV ecosystem around those apps to develop specifically on the NPU, and their NPU keeps getting more
Yeah.
powerful, and more of that creator capability is going to be based on some kind of generative or agentic AI.
Hmm.
There's a potential they might be able to kind of divert the flow of that river.
Yeah.
But again, that's very much speculation. We'll have to see how the winds blow in terms of the developer ecosystem.
Yeah. So, and obviously it takes a while for the developer ecosystem to come around.
Yeah.
That's always the biggest challenge in trying to move new technology into an existing platform. So,
Yeah.
well, but we'll address that more in probably in depth in other TIRIAS casts. So we'll kind of stop there. Anything else? I mean, those are my key takeaways
Yeah.
watching the event. But any other takeaways, especially being there on the ground, that you want to note?
Yeah, so I think the only thing that I would take away is that there was a definite sense of steady and calm. I've seen a lot of the leadership team in different stages at different events, and I've seen them to be a lot more kind of. I think there was a lot of energy, but it was a lot more understated. And my feel was they were really trying to show a sense of confidence, but steady. And and Cristiano said something to that effect, where look, we're not here to tell you all about our new strategy where we're making a right turn somewhere. This is our strategy from 2021, and steady as she goes, and we're executing against it. Akash backed that up with some numbers that said, "Hey, the strategy is working, and we're going to continue to take this formula that we've developed in terms of uh, how you enter or try to disrupt these other markets, and we're going to go after it. And here are some specific numbers. So there was definitely, I think, that kind of sense getting projected out into the to the financial community. We'll see how Wall Street reacts to that, over the next quarter or so. But yeah, I think that was definitely the tone that they wanted to send.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. And I think that's probably the most important message is the fact that they're still dedicated to expanding their TAM
Yeah,
and being more than just that mobile technology provider. They are focused on being a complete solution. And
yeah.
let's face it, some of the markets that they're entering now, especially like industrial IoT, they could have been huge in if that acquisition of NXP would have gone through. But
Well,
you
even
know,
even even without that,
even without
they're starting to
yeah,
get some pull now. They're starting to
yeah,
get people or big companies from those areas coming to them and saying, "Hey, we need to
yeah.
talk, and let's see if there's a product or if there's a solution we can to go bring out together."
And
Sorry.
I agree with you. I think that AI hub, putting the AI capabilities in the hands of the developers is probably that pull
Yeah,
to really get them into a lot of these new segments. And I don't think it stops with just the ones that we've outlined here. So,
yeah, I agree.
well, that concludes another Tirias cast. Thank you for joining us. Please look for other Tirias casts or podcasts from us, both on our own channels as well as EE Times, and look for our articles in EE Times, Forbes, and other media partners, as well as our own newsletter that comes out monthly. You can subscribe to it. Just go through our website, TIRIASresearch.com. And if you have any comments or questions or even feedback or topics you'd like to see on future Tirias casts or articles, please reach out to us. I am Jim at TIRIASresearch.com, and we have Francis at TIRIASresearch.com.
Or
Thank
put a
you once again.
comment, like, and subscribe on this video.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us.